We're going to devote the rest of the program to a conversation with the running mates of the two leading candidates for governor. In alphabetical order, they are Donna Bergstrom, the Republican lieutenant governor candidate, Peggy Flanagan, running for lieutenant governor on the DFL ticket. Just to get an idea of where you are, what kind of Democrat or Republican you are, Colonel, at the beginning of the 2016 cycle, which Republican presidential candidate were you supporting?
2016, okay.
Right at the beginning.
Right at the beginning. You know, I was supporting John Kasich. I thought he presented a really good, compelling story. He was the governor, and I thought he was a great candidate.
All right. Representative?
We had two really good candidates, but I was invited to speak at the DNC by Hillary Clinton, and that was who I was supporting.
Okay.
Now, one of you will become the first Native female lieutenant governor in the state of Minnesota. And with that, you're going to be a role model and a symbol. Are you comfortable with that?
I think it's really exciting that no matter what happens, we will have an Ojibwe woman in the lieutenant governor's office. This year has been really powerful for Native women running all across the country. There are 54 Native women who are running for state offices. My daughter, who's 5 years old, thinks it's just normal. That's what Native women do. That's what moms do. And I think it's a really powerful message.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's terrific. I think, you know, having us be what the kids refer to as real models. You know, we're really out there living it, doing it. We're the real models, and I think that's just terrific. I'd like to just add also that we will have the first woman veteran as lieutenant governor, if I were to be so honored as to be elected lieutenant governor. Second in the nation, first in Minnesota.
We should say you're a retired lieutenant colonel in the Marine Corps.
That's correct.
And you're a state legislator. Okay. Along with this Native aspect of, and I know you have interest in dozens and dozens of issues, but just on the Native American issues, we have this tent city on Hiawatha and Minneapolis, and I wonder what your thought maybe goes to the role of government. What is the government's role at any level about that situation?
Well, when I had the opportunity to go to the encampment and talk with community members there, I think you know, finally, I think for a lot of folks in the state, Native people are visible. One of the things that our candidacy does is lift that up, but you've been able to see it. And we've seen now the city, the county, the state, and the tribes, and the local Native nonprofit community come together to work on this issue. And my hope is that that good work doesn't simply disappear after folks in the encampment are housed, but that we figure out how to keep those partnerships and collaborations moving forward.
Greta Call did a really interesting article about the encampment in MinnPost, and really kind of shone a light on the fact that government really hasn't helped Native people very well at all, and look what's happening in Minneapolis. What is the role of government at all in helping these folks? Well,
I mean, government just across the board really is to help people do the things collectively that we can't do individually, or that we'll do better as a collective. So, of course, we pay taxes to have the fire department, have the police come help us. Those are logical things. But really the role of government is to really level the playing field, sort of get out of the way of innovation and creativity so that these you know, innovative thinkers can come to the front. And I think when you talk about the Native community, you know, we come from a people that have had government in our lives and taken our weapons away, taken our culture away, taken our language away. And so really for us to live in a sovereign way is the way that we want to be respected. And I think having us on the ticket really brings that to the forefront. And I think it raises some of the issues of talking about tent city. You know, where is the kink in the hose? How much further back do you have to go to find out what the problems are? And then that takes you back to our Native graduation rates, which we're the worst in the nation. We're the highest out-of-home placement rates in our child protection system. So you start looking at some of the things that are happening in society, and it's no wonder that, you know, things fall apart further down the line. So I think this is an opportunity for us to really talk about these issues and to say, why do we have the highest out-of-home placement rate in the state of Minnesota? Why do we have the lowest graduation rate among our Native American and our colored students? Why is that? And why isn't anybody else alarmed by it? Because that's alarming to me.
Want to get comment about that?
I mean, I think one of the things that you see, we have our Native American caucus in the legislature. I still have some of my colleagues who walk up to me who are surprised that Native American people still exist. And that is should be shocking and horrifying for folks, which just goes to show why it's so important that we have leadership that reflects the community that it seeks to represent. We've been really intentional in the Native Caucus in going through the policies that have been introduced and then going to those bill authors to say, who have you talked to in the Native community? Oh, I talked to the county. Well, I think that this is just a real opportunity for us to be able to share our own narratives, introduce policy solutions that come from the communities themselves, and for us to really have our own voice. And, you know, when you don't see Native people, I think oftentimes, especially for Native women, at best we're invisible, and at worst we're disposable. And I think that's where we see issues of like the tent city or the missing and murdered Indigenous women, which my hope is that regardless of which one of us gets elected, that we move on making sure that this task force is created in the executive office and we can tackle these issues head on.
You know, I'm curious. There is a problem, as you know, not only in the Native community, but all over the state of Minnesota, the opioid crisis. If your ticket wins, what would a Johnson-Bergstrom administration do about this?
Well, the first thing is that we feel that we need to talk about it and educate people. This is really a crisis across our state and across our nation. We know that our folks that go into the rehab programs, a lot of times they're kicked out when they hit that relapse. And we know that relapse is definitely a part of the recovery process. So we want to make sure that we have adequate resources for them to access these rehab facilities and to be able to know that they're supported in their community and that they're going to be valued. And I think that's really going to be a message from the leadership that that's what we want to say to all Minnesotans. You're valued. We want you to be successful in the rehab program, and we're going to be there for you.
Representative?
Well, I think in order to do that, we need to be clear on how we also want to fund that. I was really disappointed to see
there was a penny a pill.
The penny a pill bill that you know, towards the end of the legislative session, Big Pharma spent you know, tens of thousands of dollars on additional lobbyists to kill that bill. You know, I talked to Representative Baker and I said, listen, brother, if you introduce that bill again next session in the form that it was, that's a bill that Tim Walz would sign and that we'd be supportive of.
He's a Republican from Wilbur.
That's right. I also had a bill specifically for the Native community that introduced additional funding for preventative treatment, as well as making sure that we're doing things in a culturally relevant way, because our community has just been decimated by this issue. So we have to be, I think we have the resources there if we're willing to, you know, push for it and make sure that that penny a pill, that feels fair to me.
We are not supporting the penny the pill. Really, I think that just feeds into the cycle, because you're taking your money from something that you want to make sure that it's prescribed in a thoughtful way. And if you incentivize sort of getting that penny the pill out there, you're going to really compound the problem. In addition, that's just going to be passed on to the consumer. So that really doesn't fit with our thinking.
When we had Congressman Walz and Commissioner Johnson on early in the campaign, they both said they would not appoint either of you to a cabinet post. But I wonder, in your discussion about should I or should I not be on the ticket, what did you lay out as what your priorities might be as Lieutenant Governor?
Well, Tim and I are really intentional about this. We've been running together for over a year now, and I think the way that you campaign is a really good indicator of how you'll govern. We've been partners. We wanted to build on the model of Lieutenant Governor Tina Smith, now Senator Smith, and Governor Dayton. I will be his senior advisor. We both have different kinds of areas of expertise, right? Tim is a command sergeant major, a teacher. He grew up in a rural community. I am a nonprofit executive, or a suburban legislator, and someone who's been a child advocate. And I think that as we look at our ticket, people can see themselves reflected in it. And I will lead on those issues where I have expertise: family, economic security, of course, education. But we will truly be partners.
What do you want to do?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, Jeff and I talked about this a lot because I obviously come with a different background. I'm a retired lieutenant colonel, and I worked as a guardian ad litem for the state of Minnesota. I worked for a short time at the Fond du Lac Center for American Indian Resources Care Clinic. So in addition to that, you know, I was a small business owner, and then when I was living out in Washington, D.C., I was a consultant for a large Fortune 500 company. So, you know, I bring this really broad and diverse background with me. In addition, I just recently was attempting to get my teaching license. So I think really what we're looking at here is me being able to go into communities with our departments, our agencies, and being able to evaluate them, figure out which programs are working, which ones are not. Education obviously is front and center. I mean, that's so important. Like I said, when I worked as a guardian ad litem, our DHS system is, I think, really failing our families on many levels. And so I think the veterans issue, of course, is going to be important for our ticket as well. But no, I will be advising him. And Jeff likes to say, look, I'm his first pick. This is what his cabinet is going to look like. Top-notch people, folks that are dedicated to public service and have a public service heart.
Let's talk about some issues here. Education. Weren't you on the education committee in the House?
I was for a term, but I'm a recovering school board member from Minneapolis Public Schools.
There you go. Thank you. Every time, and I'm trying to think of how long we've been in this business. A long time, sadly. And every single session is you're always talking about putting more money in the K-12 formula. But how much, I mean, we just keep throwing money, and we have great, huge, wide education disparities in the state of Minnesota. So really, is it money or is it something else here?
Well, I think, let's be honest about, as you were talking about being involved in this for a long time, I certainly have been too. The first time that I ever went to the Capitol to testify, I was a youth worker in 2003 and was testifying against the cuts that were proposed that year to education and to after school or out of school time. And I raised my voice. I was trembling and a little nervous sitting at that desk. But I pushed back against the $622 million cuts to K-12 education in 2003 that Jeff Johnson actually voted in favor of. And I would argue that we still haven't recovered from those cuts. We absolutely have to be strategic about how we're using our dollars, in particular as we're looking at closing the opportunity gaps between students of color, Native students, and white students. But we have to also be honest that we haven't fully recovered from those cuts, and we've got a ways to go.
Yeah, Jeff's vision really is to give parents choice, give parents the opportunity to pick the school that works best for their student.
What are the particulars of that? How would that work exactly?
Yeah, well, I mean, he talks about having a tax credit, talks about having vouchers, so everything's on the table because Einstein gave us a definition of insanity. It's doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results, and that's what we've been doing for, the last several decades, and we're not getting anywhere. Nothing different is happening, so we have to do something different, and that's Jeff's vision, and it doesn't mean that that's going to be the vision for the next 100 years. What we're saying is we just need to try something different, and we think it's really important to empower our parents and allow them to make that choice. The other thing too is to let our school districts know that they're on the hook for these kids graduating, and if they're not going to graduate them, what are they doing with that money? How are we going to better spend them? If that school isn't working, we can shift the money over to another school. The other thing is why aren't we talking about capping our K through 3 classes? That's where our kids are learning to read before they read to learn. So we need to have a lot of these conversations about really fixing the systemic problem in our school systems.
The winner here will have a very nice bully pulpit on a lot of issues, and I think folks would be interested in your sense of the Me Too movement, Kavanaugh hearings, the problems at the legislature with harassment and so forth. What's the role that you might play in that going forward?
Well, I mean, I think what we've seen, especially over the last few weeks, have left many women traumatized and, frankly, re-traumatized by what they watched happen in some of these hearings. I think Dr. Ford was looking for a thorough investigation. I think that was not what happened. She wasn't even questioned last week, and so
what might you do going forward in a role that has high visibility?
Well, we absolutely need to say there's no tolerance for this. As a woman who served in the legislature, I can tell you that that behavior is certainly something that I've witnessed, and it is completely unacceptable. There are task force that my colleague Jamie Becker-Finn proposed, and that's something that Tim Walz and I are absolutely in support of, and that women need to be seen, heard, and valued, and that is certainly at the front, top of mind for both of us.
Donna Bergstrom.
Well, my son brought it up, and we were talking about the Brett Kavanaugh hearings. He said, "Mom, you sound really sad about this." And I said, "You know what, Ari? I am sad because I remember in America where you were innocent and then proven guilty. And to me, what I saw with those hearings was a lynch mob mentality. And I think we really need to move away from that. I just think that was it was pitiful to watch, really, to have our elected officials going down that road.
Did you believe Dr. Ford?
We sit here with Keith Ellison on the DFL ticket, who has allegations against him. Where is that voice for his accusers, and it's a punch in the gut, really, to see him on that ticket running with people still supporting him. And I guess we need to figure out, where is the hypocrisy in all of this, because it just seems like it's a different standard here in Minnesota than it is out in D.C. So I'd like to, know about that.
Just curious, did you believe Dr. Ford?
Oh, I think I would appreciate what Susan Collins said, Senator Collins said, and that she was traumatized at some point. I don't know that there was evidence to support it being Brett Kavanaugh, so I believe that she had been traumatized. I'm just not sure who it was.
Well, we didn't know that because there wasn't a thorough investigation that was done.
He was investigated 7 times by the FBI. So I think, again, it goes back to this point of you're innocent before proven guilty, and he was guilty before he got a chance to be proven innocent. So.
How about health care is what I wanted to talk about. Are you hearing that as you go around? I mean, is that a top-of-mind issue?
Healthcare. I don't think I've heard that yet.
Is it dominating, or is it just one of many issues?
It's the top issue. I'll tell you, everywhere we go, and I've been all over the state, 12 days at the state fair, I mean, everybody's talking about it. And they said, what are we going to do about healthcare? And, Jeff Johnson's vision is to really bring in more competition into the marketplace so that we can drive down those costs. Again, just bringing choice back, not having government controlling our lives, and letting you decide what plan works best for you. So drive down the cost, bring in more competition, have co-ops if you're small businesses and want to group together, and then you have a larger voice, or if you want to do state-to-state compacts. Everything's on the table. We just really need to do something different here, because this isn't working.
Well, I think what we've mostly heard is Jeff Johnson attacking Tim Walz's plan, which, when he was hard-pressed for additional details, I think he said, I don't know, about 12 times at that press conference. But here's what I know. As we are talking about with Minnesotans, this absolutely is the #1 issue that we hear from folks. And, Tim Walz and I want to make sure that people have options, that they can buy into Minnesota Care, but we consistently keep talking about health insurance. What we need to talk is about our vision for health care, where we're focusing on preventative care. Donna and I both come from a community where I have heard our young Native people say, when I get diabetes, that's unacceptable. We should be investing in prevention. We should be investing in innovation, where we are the state that cures cancer. We are the state that cures Alzheimer, and we're really focusing on wellness more than anything else. And Donna has benefited from public programs like gets her health care through the VA, through Indian Health Service.
I have my application pending.
You must get something through the legislature.
January 2017,
which means that we need to make sure that everybody else has access to a public option as well.
Just 90 seconds left. Gas tax has been come up in the other night in Wilmer. Johnson Bergstrom administration gas tax.
Not for it. No, we don't need it. We're already so overtaxed in the state of Minnesota. That's just another burden.
How about this infrastructure report from the engineers that had us what?
The D-? Yeah, that's
got to pay for it somehow,
right.
I suppose.
And if everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. So if government is going to spend all this money on everything, that's your and my tax dollars. And so if we're going to make infrastructure a priority, then we need to talk about that and then look at everything else and say, where can we get efficiencies in the other parts of our government so that we don't have to put the tax burden on our citizens?
How do you pay for infrastructure?
We've been kicking the can down the road for transportation for the last 10 years. I think we have to be real about that investment. A gas tax is certainly on the table because our roads, our bridges, our infrastructure, it was actually, we got a C. Tim is a teacher, a C is unacceptable, and we have to be honest. And Minnesotans simply just want to know what they're paying for. And I think that's fair. And our job is to really lay out that vision.
Sam, curious, who are your political heroes?
Oh, Ronald Reagan. Absolutely.
And your political heroes?
Senator Paul Wellstone and Wilma Mankiller.
All right. We wish you both well.
Yeah, great discussion.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for serving our state.
Thank you so much.
You bet.
Nice to see you.